Hey y'all, it's Kate.
And Bree.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Texas Missing Podcast, where we highlight active missing person cases in Texas. So Bree, we got our first episode out of the way. How did you feel about kind of getting that out there to everyone?
Well, I'm glad it's over with, and I was nervous.
I was nervous too. I think kind of putting ourselves out there is not something we're used to, like in this capacity, but I am really excited for how it turned out.
Yeah, me too. Thank God it was just mostly my family that was listening to it.
So what were your initial thoughts when you first started researching the case?
So there were a lot of issues kind of for me when I was researching. The lack of information was a big one, and then the lack of communication. I tried to reach out to, multiple people in this case, never received a response.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything that I have is kind of secondhand information. And so timelines get skewed, and I think there's a lot of misinformation.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of inconsistencies in between all the different news articles. I do want to give a trigger warning. In this episode, we are going to talk about possible crimes against children and a case involving a missing child. And so if those are topics that are triggering to you, I would sit this one out. In 2013, Tiara Mcwilliams, who lived in Wisconsin, allowed her 5-year-old daughter to spend the summer with her father, Anthony Deadrick, in Houston, Texas. Once the summer concluded, Anthony refused to give his daughter back to Tiara and eventually tapered off all communication, completely cutting off Tiara from her daughter. 3 years passed from that point, and in 2016, Tiara was notified that Anthony was in prison. But when Tiara questioned where her daughter was, it was realized that no one knew. And as of today, she is still missing. This is the story of Ameera Deadrick.
So this case starts October 1st, 2008, when Ameera Deadrick was born in Houston, Texas, to Tiara Stamps McWilliams and Anthony Deadrick. Just for future reference, Tiara also goes by Tiara Stamps and Tiara McWilliams. In February 2009, Tiara moved from Houston to Wisconsin to get away from Anthony. At this point, I actually think she bounced around from Illinois and Wisconsin. I know that she was born in Illinois, but based on background records, I think she spent a little bit of time bouncing around between Illinois and Wisconsin after she moved from Houston. Tiara stated that when she left, Anthony told her that she would pay for taking his daughter from him. I guess those were his exact words.
Well, and she had fled, from what she states, because of domestic violence too. I think she mentioned that in a couple articles that's why she ended up leaving.
Right. Something interesting, I think, was she stated that, and Anthony does have a lengthy criminal history, but domestic violence or domestic assaults was not one of those charges. Unless you found charges.
I don't think I saw any domestic violence charges. There was assault charges.
Yeah.
Several assault charges. Yeah. But I didn't see something that was specific to domestic violence.
Yeah, and in Texas, a domestic violence charge is classified as a domestic assault. So, according to news reports, Tiara and Anthony started talking every day once Tiara had gone to Wisconsin, and they rekindled their friendship, and she was sending pictures to Anthony, and apparently everything was good.
Well, he even visited. He went up to Wisconsin to visit them as well. So from all standpoints, I guess their relationship had gotten better, at least on the co-parenting front.
Right. In 2013, because of their newly rekindled friendship, Tiara allowed Ameera, who was 4 years old at the time, to spend the summer with Anthony in Houston while Tiara stayed in Wisconsin. Tiara stated that when the summer ended, Anthony was supposed to bring Ameera back to Wisconsin, but when that time came, Anthony refused. I'm not gonna lie, I would never let my child go across the country by themselves with somebody who has a history of violence against me.
Well, and I think I guess you always go back to his statement to her when she initially fled, I'm gonna make you pay for this. Maybe he stuck with that, and he purposefully, built that relationship back up to get that trust to get her back.
Yeah.
So you got to think of it that way too.
Yeah, I agree. So in the spring of 2014, Tiara flew back to Houston to get Ameera back. At this time, she said that Anthony would allow her to see Ameera, but wouldn't let her be left alone, and basically monitored their entire visits together. She said she tried to get the police involved, but as Kate and I both know from prior law enforcement experience, if there's no custody agreement in place, there's not really anything that police can do. Custody between parents is a civil issue, and in Texas, police don't have the right to take a child away from one parent and give it to another parent.
Right. Especially, and I know I saw some comments kind of on some of the articles about, well, the police didn't do anything at this moment. Well, they couldn't. There was nothing they could do. Even Tiara had mentioned to police there was nothing abusive in nature, and that it was purely just wanting to get her daughter back. And what people have to understand is that at that point in time, the cops had zero, ammunition to go on to take her back,
Right. Even if there had been a custody agreement in place,
mm-hmm.
police couldn't have taken Ameera
right.
from Anthony.
Right.
They would have just filed an interference with child custody report.
Yeah.
And I think that the general public, that's something that they struggle to understand.
Yeah. Well, there would have had to have been some obvious signs of abuse in that Ameera was in significant immediate danger for the cops to intervene.
Right. So at some point, and it's unclear when, Tiara goes back to Wisconsin without Ameera. She says communication with Ameera started to decrease when she got back. Her phone calls were not being answered as frequently, and I guess that rekindled friendship had kind of just declined.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tiara says that the last time she talked to Ameera was when Ameera was 6 years old. And then after that, all communication stopped completely. She didn't hear from her after that. So at this point, the timeline for me gets a little bit distorted just based off of what Tiara has said and the criminal history background check that Kate and I have run.
Yeah, because from 2014 to about 2016, it's kind of just blacked out.
Right.
We don't know what happened, and because we couldn't contact anyone, we weren't able to fill any of those voids.
So in order to fill those voids, we requested a copy of Anthony's criminal history. So we do have all of his arrests, and we'll go through that as this episode goes on. In the spring of 2016, Tiara had gotten word that Anthony had been arrested and sent to prison. We're not sure who told her that. He was arrested in April of 2016. He was not sent to prison at that time. We don't know if there was a bond placed or if he was released on bond, if anybody was able to pay that bond. These are just some of the things that we're unsure of at this point. At this point in the case, police became involved because Tiara was looking for Ameera now that Anthony had been arrested. And this is when she realized that Ameera had never been enrolled in school. And at this point, she was almost 8 years old.
Yeah, because the missing person report was filed in 2017. So that was about, 4 years after Ameera went down there in 2013.
Yeah, so the last time that Ameera was seen was her birthday, which was October 1st, 2016. 3 days after that, Anthony gets arrested. And it's at this point she was listed as a missing person.
But like we talked about earlier, the varied reports in between the news articles. So some of them said that the last time anyone saw her was 2016 before Anthony was incarcerated. One of them said 2016 after he was incarcerated. And there was even one that said the last time she was seen was in January of 2014. There's just so much variance. But we kind of are going off of what the Texas Attorney General has stated, because I think they are the ones in charge of the case at this point. But they basically took the timeline and said that Ameera disappeared sometime between April and November of 2016, and that's a huge gap. And we couldn't even figure out who was the last person to see her. That's kind of some of the information that is just missing that we couldn't find.
We don't really even know how many people were involved in this case, because at this point Anthony had a live-in girlfriend named LaShonda Spikes, and she is also involved in this case. We're just not exactly sure how.
Yeah, because she was even notated to be with Anthony in 2013 when he initially had Ameera that summer. So, but at this point in time, on this day, we do not know if they are still in a relationship.
Yeah, we don't even know if he's in prison or out of prison at this point. So the reason that I say we don't know if he is currently in prison or not is because the last time that he was arrested was November 13th, 2021, and it was a burglary of habitation. And at this point he could be in jail being held on bond, or he may have been able to have been bailed out. It's just really hard to know at this point.
Yeah, well, and what we do know is in 2020 he did get out. Based on an interview that Tiara did, he had contacted her in 2020 when she was trying to find where Ameera was, and he was in a halfway house. And Anthony told her once he gets out of the halfway house, he will go and get Ameera. And obviously that didn't happen. So we do have that time frame of when he was out. He was in a halfway house, but his criminal record is a mile long. And so we just are not for certain of if he went back, which he most likely did.
Right. And it's really, without being able to speak to anybody, it's hard to know if he was bailed out when he was waiting for his sentencing hearings or his court hearings, or if he spent the time in jail.
Yeah, but let's go back to when we do know he was incarcerated during that 2017 to 2020 time period. Like we said, police did get involved. They did go to the prison and interview him. And from a couple of reports, it said they did a polygraph, but we do not have any other information about that, whether that even happened, if he passed, if he failed. So what Anthony did tell them is before he was incarcerated, he took Ameera to Waco and gave Ameera to a woman named Tootie or Linda at a convenience store. And yes, you heard that right. So
And it's not somebody who worked at the convenience store.
Correct.
It was just a lady at the store.
Yes, and that's what he has maintained until this very day. Police did make contact at this location, and they told the police that there was no one by that name, and there's never been someone that has lived there by that name.
Yeah, because he gave the address.
Yeah.
Or an
address.
Of Tootie Linda.
Yeah. And Tootie is Tootie, according to reports. But Tootie, aka Linda, they've never been found. There's no last name, so there's no substantiation of that.
I think that's interesting because in August of 2016, he was arrested by Mahia PD. And then in October of 2016, so October 4th, 3 days after Ameera's birthday, he was arrested in Leon County. Both of those are in fairly close proximity to
They're kind of
Waco.
like in between Waco and Houston. He kind of just maintains that whole corridor right there.
Right, and then in August of 2017, he was arrested in Corsicana. All of these were felonies. They were all thefts of some sort. I mean, can you even imagine leaving your child with some random person that you don't even know at a convenience store?
No, and it's so ridiculous. That's why it's most likely false. There's just no way that could have happened. I mean, I guess people sell their children at Walmart, though, so...
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Anything could happen, but really, it's just so far-fetched. Like, I couldn't even imagine doing it. But also, I mean, this is a guy who's been in and out of prison for
years.
Thefts and drugs and, manufacturing and delivering controlled substance. I mean,
he's not a saint.
He's probably spent more time in prison than he has out of prison.
Yeah.
During the same time frame, Tiara and her spouse, Johnny McWilliams, moved from Wisconsin down to Houston to try to aid in the search effort. Tiara did contact LaShonda via Facebook Messenger, I believe, and the message, I'm just going to read this message to you from LaShonda to Tiara, and it says, "I understand your hurt and frustration, but I told them everything I know. I don't have her, and I explained that to you already. I understand your hate for him, but stop coming for me when I had nothing to do with it." So she did reach out and try to contact LaShonda Spikes.
But I understand why Tiara reached out to her. LaShonda was there from the beginning in 2013. So I have a hard time believing that you just lost track of a child and you don't know where they're at. And they're just missing. And you're most likely still with that person.
Oh, absolutely. She absolutely knows what happened during that time period. She knows what happened with Ameera.
Yeah. And I think it's just sad. I just don't feel like anyone was in her corner. There was no one there protecting her. Tiara obviously also reached out to Anthony. According to reports, they live within miles of one another. And Anthony maintains the same story, that he doesn't know where she's at. And that's it. There's no more information that he's provided, and that's kind of where we're left at.
I'm not gonna lie. If somebody took my child, I'd be moving right next door, and I would harass him and stalk him daily until he told me where my child was.
Agreed. I absolutely. But we are not the only ones that think that he has more to do with it. I'm going to read y'all this quote directly from the Texas Attorney General's office. In Hill County, the Special Crimes Unit aided in an operation in Hubbard, Texas, in search of Ameera Deadrick, a young girl who has been missing since 2016. On November 30th, the Texas Attorney General's office arrived with a warrant and about 60 investigators to scour a 10-acre area, which allowed them to find evidence that could lead to more information regarding her disappearance. The case was also referred to the office by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. This search also included a cadaver search, and this was in 2021. And most recent as in June of this year, FBI conducted testing of new technology in Hubbard in the same area, hoping to help solve Ameera's disappearance. So for me, when you're searching an area, in a cadaver search at that, of the last known area where this subject lived, I feel like that's points a lot of blame, and they do believe that he's more involved than he is leading to believe, which for me, I think it's completely obvious that he knows more, whether he did truly give her away or, something more malicious happened.
Yeah, and they have to have some fairly strong evidence to have obtained a warrant to search this property.
Mm-hmm.
I would be interested to see what that warrant said
Mm-hmm.
they were specifically looking for besides a body.
Yeah, and like we talked about in the last case, this isn't an open investigation. And so, yes, we did send in for open records requests. We didn't receive anything back. I didn't really expect to receive anything back, though, especially when there's an update as early as this June. So there's probably a lot of things we do not know. There's a lot of things that police already have their eyes on that, we just don't get the information, which it's understandable. It's an active investigation.
Yeah, I think, in the near future, I think we'll probably see some more things forthcoming as far as this case is concerned, and hopefully a resolution.
Yeah, and even other people have also done their best to help find Ameera. She was actually featured in a John Walsh episode called In Pursuit. Essentially, they just highlight missing person cases, and they put kind of about all the same information out. They put all of her info out. And also, Clear Channel Outdoor, they do electronic billboards, and they did a whole month of billboards just showing missing kids and teenagers. And they featured Ameera on that as well. And so things have definitely been done to get her name out there and her face, but I didn't even know about this case until I was on the Missing and Exploited Children's or I guess it was just like their homepage. So I didn't even know about her until I looked at it myself. But that's why we're here. We want to share these stories. We want to get them out to the public as much as we can. That's the whole point. I feel like with a cold case, communicating of the case becomes really important, especially the older the case gets, because I don't think people intentionally forget about missing people, missing children. It just there's always a new case coming up. There's always new things coming up. So I think they just kind of get lost in translation, and that's kind of why we want to talk about it. We want to bring them back out to the public eye.
Yeah. Well, and the longer a case goes on, the harder it is to gather evidence, the less likely you are to locate the person. And in this case specifically, I think that because there has not been a resolution to it, there's definitely going to be a negative outcome.
Yeah, well, in one of those articles, I think it was from 2016, it said that there is no record of Ameera being enrolled in school, and there's no record of any type of, hospital visit, which I understand with hospital visits. I think it's easier to fake a child's name than an adult name, but her name has not popped up at all. And so I think it just, she's kind of disappeared. There's been no sign of her. There's been nothing.
Well, and I think Tiara has already come to terms with the fact that Ameera is probably deceased.
Yeah.
She's posted that on her Facebook page, that she does believe Ameera is in heaven. So I think that she's come to terms with that. But, obviously she's still hoping that they locate her.
Yeah, at least, bring her home.
Right.
I think that's part of the hurt, is not knowing at all and then just being left with the unknown. I think that's probably one of the worst aspects of it. But this October, Ameera would be 15 years old. So because Ameera would be 15 in October, I'm not going to share a description because it wouldn't be accurate from when she went missing a few years ago. But what I will do on our social media accounts, I will post her photo, and I will also post the age progression photo that was done last year. So it should be still pretty accurate. If you have any information regarding Ameera's disappearance, I've got 4 separate numbers you can call. So Houston Police Department at 713-884-3131, Waco Police Department 254-750-7500, the Attorney General 512-936-1673, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-843-5678. If you know anything about the disappearance regarding Ameera, please contact one of these numbers. And I do believe that there is still Crime Stoppers available too, out of Houston as well. You have anything else, Bree?
Nope, I think we've just about covered it. I did want to thank all of our listeners for supporting us. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was really awesome to see kind of all the downloads, and I know most of them were probably like, our friends and family, but we have a really awesome support system, and we actually have a lot of new followers on our social media pages that are not our friends and family, so we appreciate that as well. Our goal is to just get this information out, and we'll continue to do so. All right, well, with that being said, I'm Kate.
And I'm Bree.
And this is the Texas Missing Podcast.